Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, The Joyful Frugalista, and now here's your host, Serina Bird.
This podcast is sponsored by 4Data, a Canberra-based company that is committed to ensuring business owners have reliable and professional IT services. I'm a client of 4Data. I use their website hosting services, and I'm also reducing my email spam with their secure email hosting service. As a special offer to the Joyful Frugalista podcast listeners, 4Data will provide, wherever you are, website hosting at $12 a month and up to 2 hours initial free migration service, valued at $300. Find them online at number 4data.com.au. 4Data, they fix IT. Hello Frugalistas and welcome. Today I have a very special guest, someone who I really enjoy chatting with so much. It's going to be actually hard to stick to the sort of random 30-minute schedule that I have set for each podcast. And welcome Bushy Martin.
Yeah, great to see you, Serina. I'm like you. Once you and I get talking, the time passes very quickly, which is pretty rare. So you put a bit of pressure on me to try and keep it to 30 minutes today. I'll do my best.
Well, luckily my husband Neil, the sound producer, is sitting here and he'll give me cues and that will help. But I suspect I'm going to have to invite you back. And this is before we've even started, but this explains how excited I am to have you on. So for those of you who don't know Bushy, he does a number of things, but mainly he's a property guru. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I'm an investor all round, so I get put in the property box. So I'm a big believer in shares and property and other things, but property is where we've grown the biggest part of our portfolio. So, and it's probably the area that I've got the greatest knowledge. So
we're going to have a great discussion today about property. In addition to being a property guru, Bushy is a keynote speaker. He's an author. And in 2017, he was named as one of the top 10 property specialists in Australia by the Property Investor magazine, which is huge because that is a major publication.
Yeah, I was a real surprise, actually, Serena. I was very humbled to achieve that result. But I guess I'm in a blessed position now where I have the time and opportunity as a result of investing in property and shares and other things to give time back to others and to wake up hardworking Australians to the need to get invested in something. And I guess the exposure that came through those things resulted in that exercise. So, yeah, I'm very fortunate.
Well done. And that's not the only thing you have won. I understand that you are author of The Freedom Formula and also a follow-up book, Get Invested, and that in Get Invested won an award, in fact, 2 awards, in fact.
Yeah, won the best personal investment and finance book at last year's Australian Business Book Award. So again, very humbled with that result. But I guess I'm not a big person on awards, but what awards do give you is a little bit more exposure and therefore a better opportunity to be talking to other hardworking Aussies on what they need to be doing to protect and secure their own lifestyle long term.
Well, your writing is very readable and I really enjoy it. And I even read the back to front introduction to The Freedom Formula, cursing as I did it. And at the end, you basically said, well, most people wouldn't make the effort to do this.
No, exactly. That's a very deliberate test. For those watching or listening today, I have written the first page back to front, top to bottom. And the real message there is that investing in anything is like learning how to walk or learning how to talk. And if you don't put in the time and the energy and you just jump straight to the solution, you're likely to get yourself into a lot of strife.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting, those that, the next paragraph on the page after basically says if you haven't bothered to read it backwards, then that's a fair indication of how well you're going to go in investing because you're looking for shortcuts and you'll probably shortcut yourself in the process.
No, it was interesting because I also speak and read Mandarin Chinese, not so much these days, but that was, my background, particularly when I served as a diplomat. And traditional Chinese is always written from right to left anyway. Not so much modern Chinese in mainland China, but in Taiwan, a lot of the publications are still right to left. And it's confusing sometimes because you're often not sure whether it's going to be left to right or right to left, but you get used to it after a while. And it's about training the brain to think in a different way, I think.
Totally. I think that's the saddest thing for a lot of Australians. Serina, is that a lot of us stop learning when we leave school. And for you and I, learning is the thing that adds interest to my life. So if I haven't learned something every day, there's something wrong for me. And I think the biggest opportunity a lot of Australians have is to say, well, the world is a new place if we're willing to go out there and use our curiosity to learn from it, and that in itself creates a lot of creativity, which creates a lot of positivity. So a big fan of learning, and I love the fact that you've learned Chinese. That's a difficult language to try and learn. I've got French on the palette for this year. One of my personal goals this year is to start learning French. So we'll see how we go.
Well, coincidentally, I'd been teaching myself a bit of French through Duolingo, which is a free app, and quite enjoying it. So one of my son's best friends is French, so it's a good opportunity seeing we have French friends. So I look forward to being able to speak some Francais with you in the future, and I'm at a very, very, very early stage. But on to other things that you are doing. In addition to all of this, I understand you have a very interesting new anchoring opportunity that's open for you.
Yeah, and it's actually come out of the podcast, Serina. I've just been very fortunate to score the anchor role on the Real Estate Talk Show, which is Australia's most popular property show. It has a regular listening audience of about 120,000 people a week. The host of that's been doing it for over 12 years, and now he wants to sort of step back and do more production, and he's looking for someone to grab the chair. So just an awesome opportunity for me and an excuse to be rubbing shoulders with all of the gurus in the property space, because, again, every person I talk to, I learn something from. Again, just another outlet, really, to wake up hardworking Australians to the opportunity that's staring at all of us. And for those who don't take that opportunity and think beyond super and paying off the home loan, then life's going to get pretty grim down the track.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. And you've mentioned hardworking Australians a few times, and I think this is a really important point. This is a discussion actually I've been having with a few girlfriends actually over recent days. The fact that often we were educated to believe that you would invest in your career and somehow your career and your work is going to take care of you, that the solution to every problem is just waiting for that next promotion.
Yeah, and hey, I've been there. Well, I think most of us are brought up that way. And I spent the first nearly 20 years of my own working career doing exactly that. I was an architect. I was going flat out. It was all about the career. I only focused on income. And I hit the wall, lost everything. Working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, didn't put any energy into anything else, lost my marriage and ended up burnt out, broken and broke, basically in my early 30s. And I just think somehow we need to, it probably starts with the schools, we need to re-educate people not to focus just on career and income, but in parallel with that, we need to be investing in ourselves beyond that. So there's a big hole there, I think, in terms of our expectation of what career is going to do for us. And I often say that people have this expectation that their career is going to do everything for them. So they put everything into that. And then if that gets rocked for any reason, then it's a very, very thin layer. And I think that, what we've just been living through with COVID is a massive wake-up call for Australians who just focused on their jobs and just focused on their income. Because, I've always said the difference between most Australians, I believe, are rich. And what I mean by that is that a lot of Australians enjoy pretty good incomes. It might mean putting in big hours to get it, but pretty good incomes.
That's true.
But very, very few of us are wealthy. And wealthy, for me, the definition for wealthy is having time on your hands. So the really easy litmus test for that one is if you turned off your work income today, how long could you sustain your existing lifestyle for? And unfortunately, for most Aussies, it's days, weeks, maybe months. Very few I talk to are years. And we've had an opportunity now to recognise through the contagion that if we're not investing in other things that are going to protect and grow alternative forms of income, then we run the risk of being the victim of a similar circumstance when it occurs in the future. And I'm sure it will, unfortunately.
Well, we're living in very unprecedented and disruptive times. They've been talking about the future of work and the need for more digitized options. But I think COVID has accelerated that process of what was already happening. And there's probably even more disruption to come.
I think disruption is part of our way of life now. And those who embrace disruption, I've always said, Serina, that change creates the greatest opportunity for those who are bright enough to recognise it. And for those that embrace change, because with change comes opportunity, then those that do that are going to be very well placed. Those who hang on to the past and hang on to what used to be are in for a big shock. And we've just seen that. We've seen a lot of people that, in the retail, travel and other sectors that have been decimated by the contagion. Those things will continue to happen. So we need to be creative. We need to be able to adapt. I think one of the biggest core skills that we all need moving forward is to be able to adapt to the continuous change that life will be as we move forward.
Well, this is a good segue into talking about property and change and how it's changed, because I guess traditionally our view of property has been, bricks and mortar, very conservative, very staid, not much you can do with it. But this year has been crazy in terms of what's happened with property. And we were talking before that this time last year, a lot of younger people that I knew were like, oh, I'll never afford to get into property, almost quite upset about property investors who were taking away the property from them. Quite a negative rhetoric around property. But 1 year on, everything has changed so much.
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons for that. One, the wake-up call that we've just spoken about, and I think a recognition that leaving your money in the bank is going backwards pretty quickly, because the sort of interest rates you get on your money now, when you compare that with inflation, you're going backwards every day you leave your money in the bank. But that wake-up call of recognising that there is a need to invest in things outside of your career has forced people to start lifting their sights. And that's across the board. It's not just young people either, by the way. We've seen across the board a movement towards investing in other things, which I think is very positive. But it's a great window of opportunity. I mean, the property market, very rare that we see the property planets align, and they are coming into alignment. The property opportunity over the next 2 or 3 years is going to be pretty substantial. And we only see it once every sort of 20-odd years. Last time was in the early 2000s when we saw property really go through its growth spurt. I think we're likely to see a similar exercise moving forward. And there's a lot of incentives now. So with all of the government money flushing around in the system right across the board and people not able to travel or spend it on other things, I heard a figure the other day, Serina, where there's about $70 billion worth of money that would otherwise have been spent on overseas holidays is sitting in people's bank accounts. And with everything that's going around that, we're seeing a growth in the interest in property, but also two shares. There's never been so many first-time online traders as there has been sign up in the last 12 months.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? You mentioned the government incentives for property. Perhaps could you explain to some of our listeners who might not be familiar with these, what these incentives are?
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of them at the moment, obviously. So let's talk about a couple of them. And I might focus firstly on first-time buyers because a lot of the incentives are orientated around first-time buyers. Why? There's a simple reason why government is incentivising those over others, and that is that they recognise that first-time buyers, in terms of catering for the housing shortage, and there is a housing shortage, and a big focus of the government is on new build properties because they know if they incentivise mums and dads and first-timers to get into property, that's actually going to, and build property, that's going to reduce the housing shortage that currently exists across the country. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the government knows that the only way to get out of recession is to spend your way out of recession. And if we compared our current times and the way we've rebounded so quickly compared with similar circumstances back in the 1930s where everyone hid their money under the bed, well, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you do that. Conversely, if you've got money in your pocket and you start spending it, then what I spend becomes your income, and that becomes an upward spiral. So the government has added some really good incentives to do that, and they've done that on a number of measures. So there's obviously early access to super, and there's pros and cons with doing that. There's also the super saver scheme where you can put money tax effectively into your super and withdraw up to 30 grand to put towards a deposit on a home. There's the first home buyers grants that range from anywhere between 10 to 15 grand across the country. There's a home builders grant of 25 grand. And then there's a first home loan deposit scheme, which is another exercise where effectively the government is covering the lender's mortgage insurance cost over and above a 80% loan on getting a property. So there's very significant incentives there and good reasons to do it. I actually think they are sensible incentives. It is bringing forward demand somewhat, but given the housing shortage that we have and given the fact that, the international borders are closed and will be for some time, I think a very smart step by the government to incentivise people to be securing property at various levels.
Thank you for all of that. We are really living in some unprecedented times. What kind of advice would you give to first home buyers, people who are looking at buying property the first time, particularly young people, although not necessarily, as we mentioned, or parents of first home buyers? What kind of advice would you give to them about how to get into the market and what to look for?
Yeah, okay. Well, let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with the buyers themselves. The first thing I would say, and I'd say this from personal experience, Serina, because it's a fair while ago now. I was in the late 90s. I ended up at ground zero, lost my marriage, absolutely start again at the age of 33. Didn't have 2 cents to my name at that stage. I often joke I unfortunately got out of my first marriage with my old beaten up Toyota car and my cassettes. That was all I had to my name. And that cassette gives you a fair indication of how long ago that was. And so the big advice I would make is to be realistic about your expectations and don't treat your first property as your forever home. Treat it as a stepping stone. That's the key exercise. And the other thing to consider, I think, which is something that we did before this was even a name, we started doing this, we became rent investors. So we lived close to the city, which is where our work was at the time, in a very humble little 2-bed townhouse because that's all we could afford. And we stuck our money into property that was well over an hour south of Adelaide in those days, and we picked up that property for the massive sum of $84,000, would you believe, a 3-bedroom home by the beach. Last valuation on that property, by the way, was $515,000. So I guess one of the key messages there is set your expectations right. The place you first buy doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal, and it doesn't have to be the place you live in either. But use your capacity to put in the things that are going to grow in value as the key thing. So separate lifestyle from investment in that capacity, but also treat what you're getting into property as an investment. And what I mean by that is the numbers are more important than the property itself, and get some help with it. Property is a game of finance. So get your numbers and get your finance right before you even worry about the property. The property is actually the last thing you look at in that context.
That is great advice. I actually bought a number of properties with my ex-husband when we were actually in Taiwan, sight unseen. In fact, one I'm seeing tomorrow for the first time, and I've owned it for over 6 years. Now that seems crazy. Why would you do that? Because we looked at the numbers, we did all of that, put them into a spreadsheet and read the property management report. The property report looked at the condition of the property, was very aware of all of those issues. So what it actually looked like wasn't nearly as relevant in a way, because, I'm not going to live there.
Spot on. And you make a really good point there, that most people get into property think because they live in one, they're automatically a property expert. And that's one of the biggest fallacies that's attached to this whole exercise, because what goes with that is you start looking for properties that you would live in, not properties that are going to work well as an investment. And they're two very, very different things. And the big change there is between the emotional attachment that you have to the home you live in versus the rational numbers focus you need if you're going to treat it as an investment exercise. So that's really key. One of the other pieces of advice I'd give anyone looking at property is to treat it as an elite team sport. And what I mean by that is, again, learnt this through a lot of hard knocks, and I got a lot of blood noses on this because when I started, I didn't trust anyone. And so I made mistakes without even knowing I was making mistakes early on. When I got a bit smarter, I surrounded myself with people a lot brighter than I was in each aspect of the whole arena. And then I just became the orchestra leader. So once I was clear on what symphony I wanted to sing, I just got the best instruments in each position, from accounting through to buyer's agents, to project managers, to builders, to a mortgage broker is really important up front and early. Mm-hmm. a really good property manager is absolutely crucial, not only once you've got the property, but beforehand, because the property manager will know what style of property works best in a particular location, and I'll give you the truth.
Exactly. And they'll tell you what the vacancy rates are doing too. They'll tell you whether properties are in demand or not. They'll tell you what the estimated rents are.
Very key. They're really key players. And the analogy I often use, if you needed life-saving brain surgery, you wouldn't go to Bunnings, grab a scalpel, some cotton wool, some methylated spirits and a drill and have a go at it yourself in front of the mirror in the bathroom at home.
I hope not.
Yeah, that's exactly what most first-time property investors do. They go out and they just without much investment at all, they'll go out and buy a property. And then would you believe that over 50% of first-time investors sell a property within the first 5 years? And the reason for that is they haven't spent any time on the numbers. They haven't structured it the right way. They haven't organised the finance in the right capacity. They haven't bought the right property in the right location, set up the right way. If you get all of those things right by surrounding yourself with experts in each of those fields, then all of a sudden, property can be a really easy journey versus a nightmare if you do it the other way around.
Because it's not something that people do every day, buying and selling property, is it? And I remember
So I
remember when I bought the apartment that I am recording this podcast in, which I'm trying to think now. I think it's about almost 4 years ago now. I remember buying it in December. Yeah, about December 4 years ago. I'd been actually at a kids' party a couple of weeks beforehand where this dad of one of my kids' friends had been talking about the strategy he was planning to use for an auction. And it was actually quite interesting listening to him because I had this impression that it was a very blokey male style thing, full of lots of bravado, because that was kind of what he thought it was going to be like. He was doing this research and prepping himself for it. And when I actually went to the auction, well, not only did I bid and I won it at auction, well, actually, I didn't buy it quite like that. It didn't reach reserve and I was the only bidder. So then I was able to negotiate a price, but I still ended up buying it on auction terms. But it was exactly what I wanted, so I was happy to do that. What was fascinating was the amount of other women who were bidding at auction and quite confidently. But it isn't something you do every day, is it? And it's quite intimidating.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're right. About average once every 3.5 years is how often that happens. One other thing, and sort of leveraging off what you've just mentioned there, we talked about in your question, you talked about parents and what they should, mums and dads, what should they be doing to help their children on their property journey. I think it's a really important question because the easy road and what the banks would like you to do is to go as guarantor. And guarantor sounds pretty ineffectual. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll just sign this piece of paper and I'm a guarantor.
And parents want to help their kids, don't they? You want to do everything you can to set up your kids.
And I think there's a lot of merit in that. I 100%. I often say, why wait until you die before you help out your kids? Donate your driveway to them now to help them get into their own home, but do that very carefully. Don't do it as a guarantor. But they really because some of the risks associated with being a guarantor, and the banks don't talk enough about this, are that one, you are, as a guarantor, totally responsible for your kids' debt. So
the whole debt.
They can't pay their mortgage and they can't cover it, you're responsible for it, which means, and they often will use that security against your own home. So you're actually putting your own home at risk by going as a guarantor. There's different types of guarantor, but that's certainly one of the risks. One of the other risks that a lot of parents don't think about, though, is that because you've virtually been accepting responsibility for your kids' debt, it also reduces how much additional borrowings you can secure if you want to do something different yourself. So if you want to get another property, whether it be an investment property, rental property, a holiday home, or in fact you want to change your own home to something else, that guarantor position can really tie you up in knots. So don't be guarantor. The simple way of helping out your kids is to take out a very small dedicated loan against existing property. So you're just responsible for that portion. That's against your property. It has nothing to do with your kids' portion. You donate that as it can be a repayable gift, if you like, to your kids that forms a part of the deposit. And then they take out their own loan against the property based on what they are capable of doing. That keeps them both completely separate. You're still helping your kids out by doing that. but you're minimising your exposure and you're minimising your risk in a way that's helping everyone but protecting everyone at the same time.
So effectively, you're taking out a smaller loan and giving them access to a smaller amount of money, which gives them the cash they need as they're buying the property, but you're not exposing yourself to the full risk should your son or daughter default.
It's spot on, absolutely spot on. Yeah.
That's quite smart. I haven't thought about that.
Simple. It's a very simple thing. It achieves exactly the same thing, but from a risk protection perspective. And it also means, though, that, I was brought up by my parents that if you wanted it, my good father always used to say, son, you can have anything you want just as soon as you've saved up the money.
I love that.
And it was the best advice he's ever given me, because when all my mates at school were getting cars from their parents and I was hounding Dad, and he said, you can have a car as soon as you've saved up the money to buy one, son, so go for broke. Great, really great lessons. So the part of helping your children, I believe, is tough love. I do the same thing with my son now. I use exactly those same analogies with my son. So I sort of briefly touched on expectations earlier on. Unfortunately, we live in an instant iPhone everything world where the patience and persistence muscles have withered and died on the vine, unfortunately, Serina. And that concept of delayed gratification is something that people just don't have to be exposed themselves too much in any other aspect of their lives. But if you're going to be successful investing or property, then you do need to not sacrifice a lot, but you do need to put some money away and put into things that are going to benefit you long term, not focus on the here and now so much.
Yeah, delayed gratification is a big one. And this day and age, things are so instant, aren't they? Whether it's going to shop and buy or even e-commerce. I can buy things on Amazon and have them within the next day or the day after. And so you get so accustomed to having it now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we break it either. It's the great conundrum for me, Serena. It's a question I continue to ask to try and get to the bottom of how can we motivate and inspire people to recognise the benefit of delayed gratification and recognising that sustainable success is a long-term journey. That's the one thing that I have learned over time is that, and I've done a lot of study, I've looked at what we've done and what others have done. Every person who's sustainably successful, and I mean sustainably, which is ongoing, that's at least a 15-year journey. And the good news about that is once you accept that sustainable success in anything is going to take 15 years and you embrace that time rather than try and fight that time, where everyone's in such a gut-busting hurry to do things yesterday, if you embrace it and slow down and you can actually enjoy that journey rather than feel like you're up against it all the time. So from a mindset and a headset perspective, embracing that long-term journey and then doing little things today that are going to give you a much bigger benefit later on is going to reap big rewards. But trying to get that through, and it's not just young ones that are in this position. I see this in clients at all ages just don't recognise the benefit of delayed gratification.
It is huge, and as you know, there's been studies done on this, famously the Marshmallow study. I can't remember who did it. I'm sure you're aware of this too.
Yeah, Harvard study many years ago. Yeah, dead right.
Yeah, where children were put in a room with 2 marshmallows or 1 marshmallow and told if you wait, you will get 2 marshmallows. And it was very interesting to observe some children would just gobble down that marshmallow straight away. Others would find techniques to distract themselves, knowing that if they waited, was it half an hour or an hour? It wasn't that long.
Wasn't long.
They would have a second marshmallow. But so many of us, when it comes to investing, don't want to wait. I have one final question for you, Bushy, which is, do you have a Frugalista tip? Do you have something that you do that might be a bit quirky or unusual to save money that is a bit frugal?
Yeah, well, my wife and I are real advocates of the access versus ownership approach to life, I guess. And what I mean by that is, and the way we've interpreted that is to access lifestyle, but only own assets. And I need to define what an asset is. An asset is something that grows in value. It gives you a regular and ongoing stream of income, and it's a saleable asset at the same time. So if you put your own home on that definition, it's not an asset. It's actually a liability, because your own home is taking money out of your pocket, not putting money into your pocket. So hence the reason why, for many years, rent vesting's become trendy, where you rent where you live and you invest in property assets that grow in value elsewhere. That's one of the things that pretty much affects everything we do. So when we go on holidays, we home share or we property share. So we had a fantastic holiday in Freycinet in Tasmania a while back, where we did a house exchange, where we stayed on their beautiful two-storey property right on the beach for nothing for 2 weeks. And we offered up our property, but you don't have to do it at the same time. We offered up our own property to do the same in Adelaide. And they've never come back to our property in Adelaide, by the way, to do this. But we had a fantastic holiday for zero cost in a beautiful property. So that's that access thing that I'm talking about. You don't have to own it. A couple of the other things that I think are really important, and I'm talking at the granular day-to-day level, every year we revisit and renegotiate our home loans, our insurances, our power, our telephones. Our biggest costs, our biggest living costs are in those items. And don't be scared to pick up the phone and ask the hard question, because you will save yourself thousands of dollars a year. Home loans, for example, because we've got a brokerage business, it's not difficult for us to save anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a month just by renegotiating home loans.
Wow.
Now, that's between 12 and 24 grand a year. And if you put tax on that, if you have to go out and earn the money, that you're giving yourself a 25 to 30 grand pay rise just by renegotiating your home loan. I just encourage people to pick up the phone and ask the hard question. You'll be amazed at how much you can do to put into the bottom line just by doing that, because it's, the old thing, it's not how much you earn, it's how much you spend that counts. So really focus on your spending. The other thing that we continue to do is we buy last minute and we buy second hand. This might sound interesting, but some of our best holidays we've secured right on the death knell. So we did a fantastic 2-week cruise around from Sydney to New Zealand, Tasmania and back. Top class suite right at the front of the boat for $1,500.
This is music to my husband Neil's ears. He loves a good cruise, and I can see him already smiling and going, can't wait until this pandemic is over so he can go cruising again.
Well, yeah, I was a very reluctant cruiser and my wife convinced me to do it. But what I hadn't recognised is that when it gets right to the death knell, before a cruise is about to sail, they need to fill the empty cabins. Yeah, and there's some great websites around that will give you access to those right before the death knell. And the other thing is that quite often they re-release stuff at midnight. So we'd often book it at between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the stuff came back onto the market and you could snap it up right at the death knell to get things way cheaper than what you otherwise would. Last minute is really key, and that goes with food as well. So we buy daily almost now, because we don't want to waste it. The amount of food wastage that we used to do by doing a once a week shop, and we'd throw a lot of it away because it would go off or we wouldn't use it or what have you. So we just buy what we need day to day now, and it's a saving tip, but it's also a wastage exercise. And our best clothes are second hand. My best jeans are jeans I still get at the salvos. But they are. And my wife Sonia has this fantastic jacket. It's a beautiful jacket. It's a timeless piece. It cost her $20. It's a full length leather jacket. It's beautiful looking, which she bought second-hand at an op shop. And a number of comments, every time she wears that jacket, someone says, "Oh, that is a beautiful jacket. Where did you get that?" And we're smiling on the inside when she paid $20 to get it. I'm a big advocate of buying second-hand in those simple things, because it's the simple day-to-day things that create the bigger things. So if we're saving day-to-day, then we're creating capacity to invest in other things down the track.
Well, that's music to my ears, because in 2021 I'm launching the Joyful Fashionista, so a website for selling very quality and beautiful second-hand clothes.
We'll be your first customer, Serina.
Developed the prototype website and I'm developing it further. I'm just deciding on the final logo. I'll send you some copies so your wife can have a look.
Please.
So thank you so much for being my guest, and I look forward to having you on again. I hope that's not too presumptuous.
I would love to.
And how can people find you? There's obviously your Get Invested podcast. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, so the podcast is the easy one, because then you'll get a sense of whether you like me or hate me, and because you'll get to hear my droning voice every week. But if you want to reach out directly, just email me at bushy@knowhow knowhowproperty.com.au. So it's knowhowproperty.com.au. If you want to find out a bit more about me, bushymartin.com.au. If you're interested in property in the investment side, then our website, knowhowproperty.com.au, is a great place to start. Feel free to reach out. Just send me a personal email at bushy@knowhowproperty.com.au, and I'd love to have a chat.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your know-how today. If you've enjoyed this and other podcasts, please make sure to subscribe and leave me a comment. I always love listening to comments. Thank you so much once again, Bushy.
Love that, Serina. Thanks for the time.
You've been listening to The Joyful Frugalista with Serina Bird. She actually likes everybody. And of course, sound has been by Neil Hadley.
We could watch the boats float by. You could talk, and I would listen. I would understand your mind. Oh, I long to be with you, walking toward the sea, and the times when I'm lonely, you could be the one to comfort me every day. I am thankful that our separate paths have crossed. Every night I lay my head down, I know I'll never feel so lost. What if we cross the river? We could start a brand new life with a house and a family. If you'd only be my wife. So I leave it to you now. You can tell me what you think. We could step to the altar. I could wake up to your face each day, and my promise